Host Alan Storman. Mr. Storman is a distinguished trial attorney, author, and lecturer. Each week, Lawline will bring you the most knowledgeable experts in the field of law today. And now, we introduce our guests and our host, Alan Storman.
Welcome to Lawline. As a result of a legal challenge by the Justice Department, New York State judicial system may have to be revamped to comply with the Voting Rights Act. The future method of selecting Supreme Court judges, election versus merit selection, hangs in the balance. Today we'll look at this topic with Assemblyman Herman Denny Farrell, Chair of the New York County Democratic Committee. We also have the Honorable Barry Cozier, Deputy Chief Administrative Judge of the New York City Court System. Hello, Assemblyman Farrell. Hello, Judge Cozier.
Hi there.
Good evening. Assemblyman Farrell, give us an idea. How are judges made in the city of New York?
You put them in the oven? No.
a little rise, a little yeast.
That's right, you do it that way. Well,
how do you become a judge?
Well, it depends. In New York City, it depends on what judge do you want to be? A judge of the family court? Do you want to be a civil court judge? Do you want to be a housing court judge? Do you want to be a Supreme Court judge? Or do you want to be a criminal court judge?
Okay, so we have many types of judges.
Right.
Well, let's start at the top, a Supreme Court judge.
Well, in Manhattan, if you want to be a Supreme Court judge, you've got to be one of the other judges first, because normally we will not take a judge for the Supreme Court who's not been a civil or a criminal court judge or a family court judge.
Now, that's only in Manhattan, but in the different other counties it can differ?
Yes, in other counties you can come directly in and go in, and I won't speak to their process because I don't know it that well.
So you could just be a lawyer one day and then a Supreme Court judge?
Yes.
The next day?
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about Manhattan. Then what happens?
Well, if you decided you wanted to be you want to become a Supreme Court judge in Manhattan, you send your resume to the county and announce that you're going to be running, so that you'll be told to all the political clubs. At the same time, I think you have to send a notice to the Office of Court Administration, which then allows you to go to political functions, because it is a political process.
Judges are not allowed to go to political functions otherwise?
They're not allowed to be members of political clubs or go to political functions, excepting in the years that they are running for re-election or election. So what would happen is you would then be invited to different groups, and you would then look in the Law Journal sometime in May, and we would announce that there will be a screening, an independent New York County independent screening panel. The judges then apply, they're called down, they're screened. Sometime in September, usually I would say about 3 weeks before the judicial convention, which is called by law, they will report 3 people for every 1 vacancy. The screening panel will say these are the 3 most highly qualified, and they're reported. So if there are, let's say, 3 vacancies, 9 names will be reported. Then in a 3-week period, they will then campaign, talking to delegates who were elected during the primary in September, and they're elected based on the amount, and the amount of them are based on the votes that was gotten for governor in the last gubernatorial primary. So you end up in New York County with about 100 being elected, and then there is a convention, and at the convention, whoever gets the majority of the votes becomes the nominee of the Democratic Party.
Judge Cozier, now that was Supreme Court. What about the other courts? We mentioned family court, the civil court, surrogates court. How do you become a judge in those courts?
Well, the initial requirement is that you must be an attorney admitted to practice of law for at least 10 years. And that is true in order to be appointed or elected to any of the courts of record in New York City or New York State. And that includes the family court of the state of New York, the criminal court of the city of New York, the civil court of the city of New York. The family court of the city of New York and the criminal court of the city of New York are appointive courts. And the appointing official is the mayor of the city of New York. And under the mayor's executive order, the mayor has a procedure where the mayor has a screening panel, which is referred to as the mayor's advisory committee on the judiciary. And that screening panel is made up of both attorneys and non-attorneys. The mayor appoints normally approximately 50% of the members of the panel. The other 50% are appointed by the presiding justices of the first and second departments. And those persons screen candidates in a fairly open process. An applicant only needs to submit an application to be considered before the screening panel for initial screening. And if they are successful going through the screening process, subsequently they will be screened by the bar associations, including the Judiciary Committee of the Association of the Bar of the City of New York. If they are successful in their screening through the Bar Association, normally the Mayor's Committee recommends 3 candidates for each vacancy.
Similar to the election process.
And then it is the Mayor's selection or appointment of a candidate.
Now, does that appointment have to be approved by anybody?
No,
By the city council or anything of that nature?
No, there is no confirmation process. The mayor is the ultimate appointing official.
And what about Supreme Court judges?
Once they come out of the panel and they come out of the convention, they then go on the machine, the voting machines, the Republicans, Conservatives.
On the ballot.
On the ballot. They all do the same thing. They come out with their own selections, and then you have an election in November. And the person with the most votes usually is the winner.
Now, we've just seen 2 different processes. One was the merit selection, and one was the election by the...
merit election. If you're going to use it over there, you must use it over here.
Merit election.
Yes.
Okay. Now, that's 2 different processes. However, the Chief Judge of the State of New York, Judith Kaye, on this particular show, has stated she's in favor of merit selection for most of the judges. How do you feel about that?
I oppose her.
And why?
Well, I believe that we have a system that's pretty well balanced right now. Why not leave it the way it is, excepting for some tinkering? In other words, we could do something like lowering the size of districts so that we make sure more minorities are elected, more women are elected. But basically, the system functions, election system works. We should continue in that direction.
What do you mean by tinkering?
Well, I think there has to be some adjustments made, and there are some problems. And I don't want to get too broad unless you ask me the question, but right now we have 2 systems of becoming a Supreme Court judge in New York City and in New York State, and one is the elective system, and the other is the appointive system to the Supreme Court. Now, we got around it by going and creating Court of Claims judges who, upon becoming Court of Claims judges, are made automatically Supreme Court judges.
Acting Supremes.
Acting Supreme, but they have all the powers of a Supreme Court judge. As a matter of fact, right now, we have a problem in New York City that I see, that we have all the acting Supreme Court judges sitting in 100 Center Street, while those that have been elected are sitting over in 111, and they have to walk across the street. And the ones that happen to be the ones that are doing that are all the minority judges.
What's your position on that? If you could change that, what would you do?
We would go to all elective judges. We have a Supreme Court system of election. We should deal with that. As a matter of fact,
you're opposed to the acting Supreme Court judges right now. What do you say about that?
Well, I think that there are a couple of different issues. There is a merit selection which, in some instances, has been distinguished from appointive, an appointive or selection system. And I think the distinguishing features of merit selection, as I think it's been supported by a couple of good government groups, is that it is based upon what is a nonpartisan, neutral commission that actually reviews the credentials of candidates and makes recommendations to the appointing official, be it the governor or the mayor. The other distinguishing feature is that while the electorate has no role in the initial appointment, subsequently, after a period of years, whatever period is designated, be it 2 or 5, there can be retention elections for those judges who were appointed, and thereby giving the electorate an opportunity to endorse or confirm those persons.
Senator Farrell, how does that sound to you?
Well,
That's merit selection. What do you say?
When you talk about nonpartisan, I immediately get a little nervous because I think of Ronald Reagan and I remember his litmus test. Where do you stand on the death penalty? Where do you stand on abortions? If you put those 2 things in there, that is political. He's carrying a political agenda as a governor or as a chief executive or as a president or as a mayor, and that ends up getting into your judiciary, just as the voters do it. But it should be the voters' right to make political decisions, not the electorate, the chief executives.
I don't disagree with Assemblyman Farrell to the extent that whichever process is employed, it is political. To the extent that there is an appointing executive who is always a political figure, or to the extent that it goes through the elective political process, we will always have political elements in whichever system
But
we
Judge
have.
Crozier, Assemblyman Farrell is saying one is in the hands of the people
That's
as
correct.
opposed to the executive.
Right.
That's a big difference on that.
Yeah, I think that and I am not indicating that I am opposed to a totally elective system. I want that to be clear. I think that my concern, particularly from my standpoint as an administrator in the court system, is that we currently have a hybrid type of system, which is very, very complex, which has many different overlays, and which is not unified. I think that there's another approach, and the recent Voting Rights Act controversy in New York State really helps us to focus on another issue, and that is the question of merger of the trial courts in New York State.
Well, that means all the judges would be the same? A Supreme
Well,
Court judge can sit in family court?
It means that similar to most states which now have a unified court system, there is a single-level trial bench, whether it's the Supreme Court or the Superior Court, where all of the judges are co-equal and where they can serve in various capacities in various divisions of the court, be it the surrogates division, the family division, the criminal division, the civil division.
Judge, you're the chief judge in New York City. How many judges are under your supervision?
A little in excess of 500. currently.
500 judges. And how many of those are selected by merit selection and selected through the election process, approximately?
Boy, it's offhand, it's difficult to give
300,
figures.
300 elected?
No, 200 elected, because the reason I'm using that is there's 101
200 elected and 300 by merit
There's
selection.
100 Supreme Court judges sitting who were elected.
Of
so
course,
Approximately, yeah.
I would assume the
Approximately.
whole idea of appointment and election of judges is to get the best qualified people on the bench that reflect the community.
That's correct.
And do you feel the present system reflects the community?
I think it comes pretty close to it, but I think there's a different problem, and I think the judge's problem is, as the administrative judge, is we passed political laws that gave him 110 civil court judges, and he right now needs 200 Supreme Court judges when they only give him 100. So he's caught in a situation where he's got to find ways to balance off the political of what we created for him, and at the same time keep the courts closed, and I mean keep the courts open. Right now your biggest problems are drugs, right? So you got a whole problem in that all of our trial parts are being used to deal with drug cases. We don't have as many Supreme Court judges as we have trial parts for those people. So what he has to do is find a way to move them. So the system before he got there, it's not, I don't mean to blame him, I'm just talking from his perspective. Before he got there, they made decisions that the fastest way to do it was to create acting Supremes. So right now, out of the probably 100 civil court judges who were elected, we probably have 30 of them sitting in the civil court. The remainder of them are acting Supreme Courts or criminal court judges.
Wasn't that also criticized not only by Assemblyman Farrell, but by the Justice Department?
Well, the Justice
I
Department...
didn't criticize, by the way, I just explaining.
The Justice Department didn't address all acting Supreme Court justices in their objections. They did address a class of Supreme Court justices, and those are judges who are judges of the Court of Claims of the state of New York, who have been assigned or designated acting Supreme Court justices within the city of New York.
Now, I understand that the whole thing with the Justice Department, they want the judges more to reflect the ethnicity of the population of the city of New York, and they feel it does not currently.
Well, I won't get into them, but on January 20th, I spoke to the Justice Department, and their concern, of course, is the Voting Rights Act and the pre-clearance. They haven't even gotten to the substance. What they are talking about is that it was never pre-cleared. So before they can really get into their complaint as to what they feel wrong with it, they said, you never gave us a chance to make a decision. What we're looking at is the appointed judges have created 100 appointed judges, and there is X amount of minorities, and on the face of it, it appears that there is something wrong, so we want to look at it. So that's what it's about.
Assemblyman Farrell, it's been noted or discussed that you cannot become a Supreme Court judge in any county of this city without the approval of the county leader. How do you feel about that?
That's a hard question to answer. I was trying to think who's gotten to the bench before without my approval. And I think a lot of people have gotten there without my approval.
Before?
Yeah, no.
You're sitting 13 or 14 years now.
14 years. In other words, somebody will come to me and say, this is who we want to go with, and I help them package it. But it's not my approval. It needs 50 votes for it to occur. They have to come out of a screening passage, and then they have to get 50 votes. So what happens is I help put the package together. It happens that I may be, and this sounds conceited, but it's proven, I am the best at putting packages together. And when the next person comes along who's better than I am, they're going to put the packages together.
Sort of like a broker?
No, it's sort of like playing power games. You've got to know how to move people around and talk to people. It creates a lot of problems, and probably people are saying right now, boy, that's conceited. But that's the way, because what happens is under our system, what we call the tyranny of the majority doesn't happen. You're able to package. I come to you and I say, hey, you represent 10 people. I need your votes. What do you want? And you say, well, I want Judge Jones. And I say, good. He wants Judge Smith now, and he's got 10 votes. Now, if you get together and you support him and he supports you, and I support both of you because I've got 10 votes, we can get Jones, Smith, and this. While we're doing it, we're also saying, wait a minute, how many women do we have on the bench? How many gays do we have on the bench? How many males do we have?
Hispanics?
Blacks, where are we at? We're balancing, we're trying to balance the slate at the same time. And I point out Manhattan, which has 38 judges, has 10 blacks, 2 Latinos, 2 gays, 16 women, and 1 Asian. So out of the 38, we've got approximately 16 women, and out of 38, we've got approximately 17 minority, which is not bad when you look at the numbers. It could be better. But that process, 14 years of doing it, has produced that.
We're going to explore this a little further. We have to take a break now. You're watching Lawline. I'm Alan Schnorman, your host. Stay with us.
The air dances with the waters, which brings the rain that feeds the land, that is home to the animals. All life dances together.
In a world so connected, choosing one environmental cause can be hard. Earthshare is 40 environmental charities working together. You and your company can help by calling 1-800-MY-SHARE.
All life lives, or doesn't, together.
Excuse me. Do you wear your safety belt?
Why, no. I don't wear my safety belt.
Thank you.
You could learn a lot from a dummy. Buckle your safety belt.
Here's one time it doesn't matter who your neighbor is. Here's the other. Life's too short. Stop the hate.
Hello, you're watching Lawline. I'm Alan Schnorman, your host. Today's topic is election of judges versus merit selection of judges. We're honored to have the Honorable Barry Cozier, Chief Administrative Judge of the New York City Court System, and Assemblyman Denny Farrell, Chair of the New York County Democratic Committee. Judge Cozier, now you've come out of both processes, the merit selection as well as the election process.
That's correct.
Now, the election process, that was in Brooklyn, was it not?
No, it was in New York City. The election process was out of the 2nd Judicial District, Kings County and Richmond County.
So you had to go through the Democratic Convention, which Assemblyman Farrell just discussed.
Correct.
And you went to that convention.
That's
right?
correct.
And you spoke at that convention.
That's correct.
All right. Now, many people say the convention is sewn up before you even get there. You know whether or not you're going to be appointed as Supreme Court, nominated or not nominated. How do you feel about that?
Well, I don't think that statement is an accurate statement to the extent that the convention process differs from county to county and also from year to year. There are instances where you will basically receive some assurance that you are a front runner at the convention. And the expectation is that there are sufficient votes which, based upon the process of actually speaking to the district leaders and the county leaders, which should, of course, come your way at the time of the convention. There are many instances, of course, where the convention is unpredictable to the extent that on the floor things will develop, and in fact there will be floor fights and just a number of variations. So I don't think that there's any guarantee with even when you are going to the convention as such. But I think that, as Assemblyman Farrell has indicated, to the extent that the process involves negotiation between the various delegates who represent the district leaders and the input of the county leader, at the time that you reach the convention stage, you have some idea of whether or not you stand to be nominated.
Judge Cozy, there's one thing I don't understand. Hopefully you'll explain it to me. You can be sitting as a Supreme Court judge for 14 years, and I believe that's the term. Now, we just learned that you cannot be political at all during that 14 years. And then all of a sudden, you're up for re-election. You have to be renominated. Your name has to go back on the ballot.
Correct.
And you have to go to those people, those state committee people, who you haven't seen in years.
Correct.
You haven't seen them at functions. You haven't visited them at the clubhouse, because that's all against the rules and regulations. You have to go back to them after 13 or 14 years and say, well, here I am again. I know I haven't been active. I know you don't know me. In fact, most of you guys weren't here when I was here 14 years ago. But I'm looking for the renomination. It's inconsistent that all of a sudden you could only become political in that last year or right before the election. How do you feel about that?
Well, I agree that it is inconsistent. It is really one of the dilemmas that we have in the elective system, to the extent that the rules of the court, the rules of the chief judge, proscribe political activity by a judge who is sitting on the bench, except during those years where that judge is seeking election or re-election, and then only for the period of 9 months immediately preceding either the primary in the case of a civil court candidate or the judicial convention in the case of a Supreme Court candidate. And it places a tremendous burden on a judge who is being renominated to, of course, resurface in the political process and to resume, contacts.
But what happens normally, I know, and excepting for a time I'll talk about, we treat sitting judges, I'll speak for Manhattan.
For your county.
Yeah, I mean, unless you get caught with a gun in your hand and you're sitting in a jail, you're not going to be not renamed. In the 30 years I've been involved in politics and going to judicial conventions, only twice was there a concern in Manhattan of replacing 2 judges, and what happened by unanimous consent after everybody, including their best friends, went up to them and said, look, I think you really shouldn't run for re-election, and they withdrew. But other than that, we don't do that, because once you start to do that, you have a problem, I think, whatever grounds of removing a judge. It happened in the Bronx about 8 years ago or 9 years ago.
What's controversy about
which
that?
created, I joined in, normally you never go across county lines, and I remember attacking the issue and supporting the 2 incumbent judges who were removed, especially when they were supposedly removed based on the minority preference. In other words, they were being replaced by 2 minorities, which was not true, because at the time they were filling 4 slots. And all they had to do if they wanted to give it to the minorities was give them the 2 vacant slots instead of creating the 2 slots.
Assemblyman Farrell, I know some judges today who are white and some Jewish or Italian who feel that their chances of becoming a Supreme Court judge have lessened over the years, and that they're going to have to wait many, many more years, because now the trend is for Latino and minority judges to take the branch. How do you feel about that?
Well, it's how is the glass, half full or half empty? I'd prefer to talk about the fact that in the last 20 years, or especially in the last 10 years that I know of, people have been working harder to make sure the bench reflects the community. For years, we've had minorities living in these communities, whether it be Brooklyn or Harlem, and we didn't have black or Latino judges on the bench. Today, now, the system has become more open, and it is getting minorities. It's also getting women. I mean, for years, you didn't have women on the bench. Now we have them on the bench. So, yes, it does diminish the white male ethnic's chance of getting the position because we've now gotten fairer in our system, and we're inviting everybody in to participate and to become one of the members of the bench.
How do you feel about this?
Well, I think that the issue is an issue of access. And I think that the statement that is made by many of the judges, as you've represented, is really an accurate statement, because if we take a look at the profile of the last 15 to 20 years in New York State, approximately 15 years ago, there were 5 to 6%. The minority representation, African American representation, may have been 5 to 6% of the state judiciary. Today, it is only 8% of the statewide judiciary. So there has really been no substantial change in terms of minority representation statewide in the last 15 years or so. And that representation, of course, is concentrated, 99% of it, in the city of New York.
And elected judges. Because the reason he's absolutely right in those statistics is because we took all of those Supreme Court judges that should have been thrown into the elective pool, we put them in the appointive pool, and they've been increasing them. So and increasing the judicial through the appointive systems. In other words, all of the judges, excepting for a few in Brooklyn and in the Bronx recently, we have always, when we create new judges to deal with our problems, we create appointive judges. And in creating the appointive judges, we have not been getting the minorities we should be getting that the appointive system has been creating. And so for that reason, as he points out, the judge points out, the percentage of going from 5 to 8% is only that amount. Whereas if you were to look at the city numbers and see the amount of minorities that have come into the city in the last 15 or 20 years, you'd see a marked improvement over the last 20 years.
So are you saying basically the appointive process is not reflecting the minorities, the minorities, the population? In other words, if the minorities are X percentage of the population, it's not, at least in the appointed process, the merit selection, it doesn't reflect.
And I'm going to talk to the appointive Supremes, because that's the one I want to talk to. And in those, the answer is yes, and I'm bringing a lawsuit on that issue. And that's,
against whom?
I'm going to be bringing against the state, and we're going to.
Well, you represent the Office of Court Administration.
Well, if we are focusing on appointive Supremes,
he just said he's threatening you with a lawsuit.
I think that the Assemblyman is accurate with respect to minority representation. If we are speaking about appointive judges overall, there has been a larger percentage of appointive minority judges over the past 15 to 20 years, including at the present time, than elected judges. And I think that the conclusion is there really is no panacea here. If one of the goals, and I think it's a necessary goal, is that we have diversity, that the bench, the judiciary, be reflective of all sectors of the population, and that is reflective in terms of gender, ethnicity, then I think that we have to focus on the fact that whoever the officials are who are involved in the process, be it the political process or the appointive process, must in fact take into account, in addition to quality, diversity.
And you heard it here on Lawline. Judge Barry Cozier, Deputy Administrative Judge of the entire city of New York, thank you very much for appearing on Lawline. Assemblyman Herman Denny Farrell, probably the head Democrat in New York, in Manhattan. Thank you very much for appearing on Lawline. And as always, this is Alan Schnorman, and thank you for watching Lawline.
You have been watching Lawline with your host, New York trial attorney Alan Schnorman. Mr. Schnorman will be back with you next week at the same time. If you have any questions about this week's program, please write to Lawline, 63 Wall Street, New York, New York, 10005, or call area code 212-432-9111. This program is made possible by the New York law firm of Zollman and Schnorman, who specialize in the field of personal injury law, located at 63 Wall Street in New York City.